Let me be blunt for a second. When you were first diagnosed with GERD, all the generic advice helped you out a bit, I'm sure. But now it's years later and your gut isn't following the same rules anymore. And no one took the time to explain to you exactly what happened. Hi friend, I'm Danielle and I explain why all that basic advice stops working after the beginner stage and how to understand exactly what is going on so then things don't get any worse. Which brings me to my first point. The rules that you learned early on was built for an earlier stage. Early on, you were told generic advice that feels totally logical. Avoid trigger foods, eat smaller meals, don't lay down before 2 hours after eating, suppress your stomach acid with PPIs, you know the whole deal. And for a while, that seems to work. It does the job. It does exactly what you needed it to. You feel better. You're functioning better at work. You can hang out with friends. You're enjoying your partner, your kids. You're enjoying them more. You're getting out of bed more. You don't feel so sick. You don't feel so sick anymore. You feel better. The advice was working. But then later, people start noticing things. Those safe foods, the non-trigger foods, they don't feel so safe anymore because you're still getting reactions from it. Now that you're eating more frequent meals, even though they're smaller, for some reason now you're gaining weight. And that's the exact opposite of what's supposed to be happening, right? Weight gain makes GERD worse, so we don't want that, right? And then now you've been waiting 2, even 3 hours before laying down, and your stomach is still messed up. You still can't even get any rest. It's starting to feel like doing everything right feels worse than doing nothing at all. And that is what makes you feel stuck. And I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to break it to you. Those rules are not necessarily wrong. They were just stage specific. They are no longer specific for your stage, my friend. They were designed for early irritation, not for a system that's been under stress for years on end. Those rules were not built for someone who's been going through it as long as you have. When symptoms begin to persist long term, the problem is no longer figuring out what to do with the stomach acid or eating the wrong food. It's that the system itself becomes extremely stressed, overloaded, and now it's totally reactive. So when you keep applying all of these beginner rules to an advanced problem, things stop lining up. That doesn't mean that you failed, my friend. That just means that the situation has changed. So if you're out of the beginner stage and you're noticing that this is starting to resonate with you, mention it in the comments below. Point number 2 is that your symptoms are not random. They're contradictory on purpose. And I know you're probably thinking in your head like, okay, she just said a whole bunch of fluff, but hear me out. People who've been dealing with this for years start to say some of the weirdest things. The stuff that doesn't follow all the basic rules that we know and have learned to not love anymore. And when you look on places like Reddit or even Facebook groups, you see people say things like, belching is what relieves the pressure. It's not causing trouble for them anymore. It's actually what makes them feel better. Herbs and supplements are helping more than medications, which is such a foreign thought nowadays. Being distracted helps more than focusing on the problem. And intermittent fasting helps more than actually changing out certain foods. None of that stuff is classic advice that you ever typically hear. And it's because when you're at an advanced stage, your symptoms are no longer coming from damage from one sole location. I know that's an interesting concept, so here's how I want you to think about it. Instead of thinking of this as one specific injury, I want you to picture this as multiple alarm systems going off all at one time. And they've been going off over and over and over again. So these symptoms, aka these alarms, are now glitchy, they're unpredictable, and they're hard to shut off because they're coming from so many locations. And that's the reason why relief can come from such random places, because you might be soothing one area and so then it provides relief for another. It's just not only governed by food rules anymore. And that is what makes it seem very contradictory. So if you've noticed that food rules are not the only thing that's brought you relief, then go ahead and mention in the comments below. I would actually like to try some things out myself if I haven't heard of them before, so let me know. So point number 3. Tests don't explain system behavior, and that gap is exactly where the confusion lives. Stay with me on this one. This is the part where a lot of people mentally start to break down because they begin to hear things like, oh, your endoscopy is normal. Oh, this test is normal. That test is normal. It's only mild inflammation. Nothing too serious is going on. But hearing things like this discounts their experience so much because everything feels so severe and awful, and it's just crippling. Maybe they can't work anymore. They can't hang out with their kids anymore. Maybe they can't be intimate with their partner anymore because this has taken over everything. But that's not what the tests say. The tests say you should be fine. And that is where it can get in your head. So here is the gap. The tests are doing their job because it's measuring structural damage. The test can tell you if the tissue is inflamed, if it's ulcerated, or if it's torn, which is great in reality, right? Because then we can do whatever we need to do in order to get better. However, what if it's not? Or what if it's a tiny tear? What if it's mild inflammation? What if it's only a little bit of damage? Then what? And that lies the gap. It can't measure reactivity. It can't measure sensitivity. It cannot measure nervous system involvement. So normal test does not mean nothing is happening. Normal tests mean what they're testing for is normal, and they do not yet have the test to measure what is truly going on in your body. So in other words, no matter what your tests say, your experience still counts. What you're going through is not just in your head, and everything you're going through makes total sense. We just have to look at this from a different lens than what we've been taught so far. Because unfortunately, what we have come to know and learn is that we should look at the body as a whole bunch of pieces of different puzzles. But that doesn't make sense because the body are multiple pieces of one puzzle. We know, probably from childhood, of putting puzzle pieces together, that when you do not have all of the pieces of that puzzle, the puzzle will never be complete. So we must start looking at the body as multiple pieces of one puzzle. On a personal note, when my test had said that I had mild inflammation, I was just distraught because my symptoms felt anything but mild. But what helped me get on track was burn blocker because it helped me stabilize and heal. But let me be very clear here. It didn't work alone, but it did create the right conditions that my gut needed to recover. The link is in the description if you're interested, and if you're not, that's fine because either way, the rest of this video remains true. You don't need more rules. You just need clarity. So if you enjoy this video, please like and subscribe. And hey, if you know anyone where they might find this information useful, please share this video with them. And if you have any ideas on what you'd like to see, please mention in the comments below because I want to hear about it and I want to show more content that you guys want to see. All right, you guys, the next video that I think you may like is this one. So go ahead and check it out.